Hi there, my name's Aaron Dawson. For nearly 20 years, I poured everything I had into building something I believed in, something solid, at a tech company called Brooks Tech Solutions. I wasn't just an employee, I was part of its foundation, its history. I used to believe that hard work would always be enough, that loyalty wasn't just a word but a shield, something that protected you, that secured your place. I thought competence and dedication spoke for themselves. That was my truth, built over 17 painstaking years, until the day everything I trusted, everything I built, got erased with one sentence. It came from someone who hadn't earned the right to say it, someone who saw legacy not as something you build, but something you inherit and, well, discard. What happened next wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive, not in the way you might think. It was quiet, deliberate, and it changed everything, not just for me, but for the company I helped create. If you've ever poured your soul into your work, ever felt overlooked, ever believed that loyalty would be enough to secure your place, stay with me until the end. You might just see yourself in this story. It started like any other Tuesday morning at Brooks Tech, or at least it tried to. You know that feeling when the air pressure changes just before a storm? That's what it felt like. Everything looked normal. The usual low hum of servers from the back room, the smell of slightly burnt coffee from the break area, people settling into their desks, keyboards already clicking away. But underneath, there was this static, this sense of something shifting. I'd been head of systems for years, practically grew up with the company. Started when it was just a handful of us crammed into a tiny office suite, dreaming big. Now it was a mid-sized player, respectable, stable. I knew its rhythms, its pulse, and that morning, the pulse was off. I was at my desk reviewing the latest system performance reports. My hair was tied back, same as always. Needed it out of the way to focus. I remember my screen showing clean data, green lights across the board, everything running smoothly, just the way I designed it, the way my team maintained it. That's what we did. We were the invisible engine, the ones who made sure everything just worked. We weren't flashy, but we were essential. My parents were school teachers, you see. They drilled into me the value of quiet diligence, of doing the job right whether anyone was watching or not. Loyalty, responsibility, those weren't just concepts, they were bedrock. And Brooks Tech, under its founder Robert Brooks, had mostly reflected that. He was tough, demanding, but fair. He appreciated competence. Then he walked in, Brandon Brooks, Robert's son, mid-30s maybe, sharp suit that looked like it cost more than my first car, a restless energy about him that always felt performative. He'd floated around the company off and on for years, usually in some vague marketing role, never really sticking, never really contributing anything substantial. But now he strode through the main office area like he owned the place, which I suppose he suddenly thought he did. He didn't call a meeting, didn't send an email. He just appeared, stood near the central hub, cleared his throat loud enough to make keyboards pause. Heads started popping up over cubicle walls. "All right, listen up, everyone," he announced, his voice bouncing off the walls a little too eagerly. "As some of you might know, my father, Robert, has decided it's time to step back. Effective immediately, I'll be taking over as CEO." Silence. Not stunned silence, more like confused silence. Robert stepping back wasn't a total shock. He'd been talking about it for a year or so. But Brandon, as CEO, nobody saw that coming. Robert had always implied leadership would go to someone seasoned, someone proven. Brandon had enthusiasm, maybe, and the right last name, apparently. He flashed this wide salesman's smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Big changes are coming," he continued, puffing his chest out slightly. "We're going to shake things up, modernize, really take Brooks Tech to the next level. It's a new era." He scanned the room, his gaze briefly flicking over me without any real recognition, like I was just part of the office furniture. That stung more than I expected. I wasn't just furniture. I was the architect of the damn house. The air thickened. That initial static I'd felt, it solidified into this heavy unease. You could see it on people's faces, veteran engineers, seasoned project managers, their expressions tightening. This wasn't inspiration, it was apprehension. Brandon's tone wasn't one of collaboration, of building on a legacy. It was dismissive. Like everything that came before him was dusty, irrelevant, obsolete. He clapped his hands together sharply. All right, back to it, big things ahead. And then he swaggered off towards the executive offices, leaving behind a ripple of nervous whispers and exchanged glances. I just sat there for a moment, looking at my screen, at the steady green lights I'd worked so hard to maintain. 17 years. 17 years of building, refining, shooting, caring, and suddenly the future felt incredibly uncertain, fragile even. That sense of unease wasn't just about a new boss. It felt personal. It felt like the ground I'd stood on so securely for nearly 2 decades was starting to crumble, replaced by something flashy, hollow, and profoundly disrespectful of the foundation beneath it. The air of arrogance wasn't just his personality, it felt like the company's new mission statement, and I had a sinking feeling about where that new mission was headed. 17 years. It sounds like a long time when you say it like that. And it was. Nearly 2 decades poured into Brooks Tech Solutions. I wasn't just an employee. I felt like a custodian of its core. When I started, Robert Brooks had this vision, a handful of brilliant coders and not much else. We were running on fumes and ambition. I came in fresh out of college, wide-eyed but determined. My role was initially just the tech person, the one who kept the few servers we had from melting down. But it grew. As the company grew, my responsibilities ballooned. I didn't just maintain systems, I designed them. I architected the entire internal network, the databases, the security protocols, every line of code, every server configuration, every backup strategy. It had my fingerprints all over it. My team and I built the invisible infrastructure that allowed Brooks Tech to scale, to handle bigger clients, more complex projects. We were the bedrock. We weren't the flashy sales guys bringing in deals or the marketing team crafting the image. We were the ones ensuring the promises made could actually be kept, that the lights stayed on, that the data was safe, that the entire operation didn't grind to a halt because of a glitch in the matrix. There were late nights, so many late nights, weekends sacrificed, moments of sheer panic when a critical system would wobble, and my team and I would dive in, fueled by coffee and adrenaline, until it was stable again. Robert Brooks, in those early and middle years, he saw it. He wasn't always expressive, but he knew who was pulling the weight. He'd walk by my department after a crisis was averted, give a curt nod, maybe a "good work, Dawson." It wasn't effusive praise, but it was acknowledgement. It meant he understood the value, the effort. It felt like enough. That belief in hard work being seen, being valued, it was reinforced. And then there was Brandon. Even back then, years ago, he was Brandon. I remember one summer, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, Robert decided his son needed some real-world experience. So Brandon became our intern. Not in marketing, where he might have done less damage, but in my department, systems. He was supposed to be learning the ropes, understanding the technical backbone of the company he might one day inherit. Honestly, it was a disaster. He had this attitude, even then. He acted like he knew everything, barely listened during training, treated the intricate systems we managed like they were simple apps on his phone. He was careless, dangerously careless. One afternoon, he was tasked with a relatively minor database cleanup script. Simple stuff, really, something any junior tech could handle with proper supervision. But Brandon, convinced he knew better, decided to optimize it. He ignored the protocols, bypassed the safeguards my team had painstakingly put in place. He ran his optimized script directly on a live staging server that mirrored our client data environment. I remember the alerts screaming first, red flags popping up all over my monitoring console. Then the calls started flooding in from project managers. Data corruption, critical testing environments suddenly unusable. It was chaos, absolute chaos. The potential damage was enormous. Weeks of work potentially lost, client deadlines jeopardized. We found the cause quickly enough. Brandon's unauthorized script. He hadn't just cleaned up, he'd wiped out crucial data links, corrupted entire tables. He was standing there, looking bewildered, muttering something about how it should have worked. There was no apology, just confusion, like the system had somehow wronged him. My team and I worked around the clock for 36 straight hours. Piece by painstaking piece, we restored the data from backups, rebuilt the corrupted tables, verified everything, triple-checked it. It was grueling, nerve-wracking work. We pulled the company back from the brink of a major disaster. one caused entirely by the founder's son's arrogance and incompetence. When it was finally over, I went to Robert's office. I laid out exactly what happened, calmly, factually. I didn't yell, didn't point fingers dramatically. I just presented the evidence, the logs, the impact. Robert listened, his face grim. He apologized for his son's actions. Brandon was quietly reassigned, shuffled off somewhere else in the company, away from anything critical. He never faced any real consequences, not publicly. But Robert knew. He knew who had caused the fire, and he knew who had put it out. After that incident, Robert gave my department more resources, more autonomy. It was his way of acknowledging the value, the necessity of what we did. It reinforced my belief. Competence matters. Loyalty matters. Doing the job right, even when it's cleaning up someone else's mess, gets noticed eventually. So when Brandon stood there that Tuesday morning, declaring himself CEO, flashing that empty smile, all those memories came rushing back. The 17 years of building, the late nights, the crises averted, that catastrophic mistake he made, the one we fixed. It wasn't just that he was taking over. It was the casual dismissal in his eyes, the complete lack of awareness, or maybe even worse, the complete lack of care for the foundation he now stood upon. A foundation I, and people like me, had spent our careers building and protecting. The 17 years felt heavy in that moment, not like a badge of honor, but like a weight suddenly deemed irrelevant, forgotten. And the injustice of it started to simmer, quiet but hot, deep inside me. The next few days under Brandon's new era were unsettling. There were grand announcements about synergy and disruption, lots of buzzwords thrown around in hastily called meetings, but nothing concrete. Just this underlying current of change for the sake of change, driven by ego rather than strategy. My team kept our heads down, focused on our work, ensuring the systems ran smoothly, same as always. We were the constants in a suddenly shifting landscape. I hoped, perhaps naively, that our essential function would shield us, that competence would still matter. Then, about a week after Brandon's announcement, I got the email. Short, curt. Meeting request, E. Dawson and B. Brooks. 10 a.m., his office, no agenda. My stomach tightened. This wasn't going to be a strategy discussion. I just knew it. I spent the next hour mentally preparing, not for a fight, but for clarity. I reviewed my employment contract, specifically a clause I'd negotiated years ago, back when Robert was still firmly in charge and valued stability. It was an unusual clause, tied to my role as head of systems and the critical infrastructure I managed. A contingency, really. Something I hoped I'd never need. Walking towards the executive suite felt different now. The plush carpet seemed thicker, the air more rarefied, more disconnected from the actual work happening floors below. Brandon's new assistant, someone I didn't recognize, waved me in without making eye contact. Brandon was leaning back in his father's large leather chair, feet up on the polished desk, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up immediately when I entered. Finally, he lowered his phone, but not his feet, and gave me that same practiced smile. "Aaron, thanks for coming," he said. His tone breezy, casual, like we were discussing the weather. "Brandon," I replied, keeping my voice steady, calm. I stood, waiting. I wasn't going to sit unless invited, wasn't going to make myself comfortable in this farce. He gestured vaguely towards the desk with his phone. "So, Aaron, been looking at the structure here, the old ways of doing things." He paused, as if expecting me to fill the silence. I didn't. "Look," he continued, finally swinging his feet off the desk and leaning forward slightly, trying to adopt a serious expression. "You've been here a long time. Appreciate the history." The word hung there, history, clearly meaning past tense. 17 years, I stated, quietly but firmly. "Right, exactly. 17 years," he echoed, nodding. "And things change, technology changes. We're moving towards a more agile, cloud-native infrastructure, outsourcing a lot of the legacy stuff, streamlining." More buzzwords, meaningless in this context. Our systems were modern, constantly updated, a hybrid model, carefully balanced for security and efficiency. He didn't understand any of it. "The systems my team manages are critical for current operations, Brandon," I said, keeping my tone level. "Outsourcing them isn't a simple switch. It requires careful planning, migration, ensuring business continuity." He waved a dismissive hand. Yeah, details. That's what our new partners are for." He leaned back again, steepling his fingers. "The point is, Aaron, your role This whole internal systems department, it's becoming redundant. Obsolete, really. Obsolete. The word hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. 17 years of dedication, innovation, crisis management dismissed as obsolete by someone who nearly burned the place down as an intern. So, he went on, clearly enjoying this part, we're restructuring, and your position, unfortunately, is being eliminated, effective immediately. There it was, the sentence I'd braced myself for, delivered with a casual indifference that was almost more insulting than the decision itself. He slid a standard severance agreement across the desk. Standard package, he said. Sign it, and we can wrap this up cleanly. I didn't look at the papers. I looked directly at him. His eyes held a flicker of something. Impatience, smugness, relief at getting this unpleasant task over with. My mind was racing, but on the surface I remained perfectly still, calm, deliberate. My parents' voices echoed faintly. Maintain your dignity even when faced with disrespect. My own principle kicked in. Self-respect isn't given, it's held. He mistook my silence for shock, maybe defeat. He smirked, a small, self-satisfied upturn of his lips. Look, it's just business, Aaron, nothing personal. Oh, but it felt personal. It felt like the erasure of my entire professional life by someone who didn't value competence, only power. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. Inside, though, a cold, hard resolve began to form, that forgotten contract clause. The one tied to the very systems he now deemed obsolete. The systems he clearly didn't understand the first thing about controlling. He thought he was cutting off a limb. He had no idea he was handing me the scalpel. I see, I said, my voice quiet even. I picked up the severance papers, not to sign them, but just to hold them. Thank you for letting me know, Brandon. He looked surprised by my composure, maybe a little disappointed he didn't get a scene. Right, well, HR will handle the offboarding. He waved a hand dismissively, already reaching for his phone again, his attention drifting. I was already forgotten. I turned and walked out of his office, the unsigned papers in my hand. My footsteps were steady on the plush carpet. Back in the hallway, the air felt a little clearer, charged with adrenaline now, not just unease. Rage was simmering beneath the surface, yes, but it was controlled. Focused. He thought he'd ended my story at Brooks Tech with a smirk and a sentence. He had no idea he'd just triggered the beginning of his own downfall. The anticipation wasn't for a loud confrontation. It was for the quiet, inevitable consequence of his arrogance, delivered through the very systems he'd so carelessly dismissed. The systems I still controlled. I didn't go back to my desk. There was nothing for me there anymore, according to Brandon. Instead, I walked calmly, deliberately, out of the main office building, found a quiet bench in the small park across the street, the one where employees sometimes ate lunch. The mid-morning sun felt warm, a strange contrast to the cold fury solidifying inside me. I took out my personal laptop, not the company-issued one I'd left powered down on my desk, connected to a secure, private network using my personal hotspot. No trace back to Brooks Tech's guest Wi-Fi. This needed to be clean, precise. I opened a secure terminal. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment. This wasn't just about revenge, not really. It was about consequences. It was about demonstrating the value he'd so casually discarded. It was about the contract. Years ago, when negotiating my terms as head of systems, understanding the absolute dependence the company had on the infrastructure I oversaw, Robert Brooks had agreed to a specific clause. It wasn't standard, not by a long shot. It stipulated that in the event of termination without cause, particularly a termination deemed detrimental to the operational stability Siedenbohr, I was fundamentally responsible for maintaining certain security protocols under my direct control could be enacted to protect the system's integrity until the terms of separation were mutually and legally agreed upon. Essentially, it was a dead man's switch tied to my employment status and the systems I built, designed to prevent a potentially disastrous handover if I were ever forced out abruptly, especially by someone who didn't understand the implications. Robert, valuing stability above all, had signed off on it. Brandon, in his haste and arrogance, clearly hadn't bothered with the fine print of key personnel contracts. He just saw a name on an org chart he wanted gone. My termination wasn't just without cause in the legal sense. It was actively reckless from an operational standpoint. Removing the head of systems and planning to immediately outsource critical, complex infrastructure without a transition plan was detrimental. He'd triggered the condition. My fingers started moving, typing commands I knew like the back of my hand, accessing the core administrative controls, the ones even Robert didn't fully understand, the ones I'd designed with multiple layers of security, fail-safes, and, yes, this specific contingency access. It wasn't a hack. It was the execution of a pre-authorized protocol. My protocol. I initiated the lockdown sequence. It wasn't destructive. It wouldn't wipe data or damage hardware. That wasn't the point. It simply revoked all administrative access except for a single encrypted key only I possessed. It locked down the internal servers, the databases, the communication platforms, the project management tools, the secure VPNs needed for remote work. Everything that made Brooks Tech function, minute to minute. One final command. Enter. A single click. I closed the laptop, sat back on the bench, took a deep breath. The air still smelled like cut grass and city traffic. Nothing outwardly had changed. But inside Brooks Tech, I knew chaos would be erupting. Not immediately, perhaps. It might take a few minutes for people to realize their logins weren't working, that the shared drives were inaccessible, that the internal messaging system was dead. But it would happen. Swiftly, completely. I pictured the scene, the initial confusion, annoyed emails to IT that wouldn't go through, calls to the help desk, which probably also relied on the lockdown systems. Then the dawning realization spreading like wildfire. Nothing was working. The entire digital nervous system of the company was frozen. Sales couldn't access client records. Developers couldn't access code repositories. Project managers couldn't update timelines. Even HR, trying to process my offboarding, would likely find their systems unresponsive. And Brandon? I imagined him in his father's chair, basking in the glow of his decisive action, probably already boasting about streamlining. Until the calls started. Not just from employees, but from clients unable to access portals, from department heads reporting total operational paralysis. His new era would grind to a screeching halt before it even got started. Sitting there on the bench, I didn't feel glee exactly. It wasn't a giddy sense of payback. It was quieter than that. A cold, hard satisfaction. The feeling of a lever being pulled, a mechanism clicking perfectly into place. He thought I was obsolete. He was about to find out just how critical obsolete could be. He dismissed 17 years of my work. Now the absence of that work would speak for itself, louder than any argument I could have made in his office. The counterattack wasn't loud, but its effects would be deafening. One click, one collapse. A quiet demonstration of value, served cold. I didn't have to wait long. Maybe 20 minutes? Half an hour? My personal cell phone, the number Brandon didn't have, but which was likely on some emergency contact list somewhere deep in the HR system he could no longer access, started ringing. An unknown number, but with the Brooks Tech main office prefix. I let it ring, and ring. Eventually, it went to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Same number. I let it go to voicemail again. A third time. This time, the caller ID showed Brandon Brooks Mobile. He must have dug out my number from somewhere else, or gotten it from someone who still had access to their personal contacts. This time I answered, kept my voice calm, neutral. Hello? Aaron? Brandon's voice was tight, high-pitched. Gone was the breezy confidence. Panic was radiating through the phone. What the hell is going on? Nothing is working. The entire system is down. Is it a hack? A server failure? What is it? I wouldn't know, Brandon, I replied evenly. As you said, my position was eliminated, effective immediately. I'm no longer responsible for Brooks Tech systems. There was a sputtering sound on the other end. Don't play games, Aaron. This is serious. We're completely paralyzed. You have to fix this. Fix what exactly? I asked, genuinely curious about how he saw this. The systems I built, the ones you deemed obsolete just an hour ago, the ones you were planning to outsource to your new partners? Aaron, damn it. This isn't the time, he practically yelled. The board is calling. Clients are calling. Just tell me what happened. Was it something you did? I executed my rights under my employment contract, Brandon, I stated simply. Specifically, the contingency clause Robert and I agreed upon years ago, the one concerning operational stability in the event of unwarranted termination. You might want to read the fine print. Silence, then a choked sound. What contract clause? What are you talking about? The one that protects the company's core systems from being destabilized by abrupt and ill-advised leadership changes, I explained patiently. The systems are secure, Brandon, not damaged, just inaccessible, pending a mutually agreeable resolution regarding my termination. You locked us out? His voice was incredulous, laced with fury now instead of just panic. You deliberately sabotaged the company? I protected the company's assets as per my contractual obligation, I corrected him. The sabotage, Brandon, was firing the one person who understood how to keep everything running without a transition plan based on nothing more than your ego. The current situation is simply the consequence of that decision. He started blustering, threatening lawsuits, termination for cause, blacklisting me in the industry. I listened quietly, let him vent his impotent rage. Brandon, I interrupted finally, my voice still calm. Threats won't restore your access. The systems are locked by an encryption key only I possess. If you want Brooks Tech to function again, I suggest you convene the board of directors. I'm available to speak with them, not with you. Have them contact me directly on this number when they're ready. And then I hung up. I switched my phone to silent, though I kept an eye on the screen. Predictably, it lit up again almost immediately with Brandon's number. I ignored it. Then a few other numbers I didn't recognize, likely panicked executives. Ignored them too. About an hour later, a call came in from a number I did recognize. Sarah Jenkins, the chairwoman of the board. A sharp, no-nonsense finance executive who'd been on the board for years. I respected Sarah. She understood value. I answered, Sarah. Aaron. Her voice was tense but professional. Brandon tells me there's a situation and that you claim it's related to your termination? That's correct, Sarah, I confirmed. Brandon terminated my employment this morning, effective immediately, calling my role and the systems I manage obsolete. My contract includes a clause approved by Robert years ago, allowing me to secure the systems under such circumstances to ensure stability during transition. Brandon's actions were destabilizing. I enacted the clause. There was a pause. I could almost hear her processing the implications. He didn't mention a contract clause, she said dryly. He called it sabotage. He didn't read the contract, I replied. The systems are safe. They are simply offline administratively until this is resolved properly. What do you want, Aaron? She asked, cutting to the chase. I want a meeting, I said, with the full board. Not Brandon. I have specific conditions for restoring access. We're convening an emergency virtual meeting right now, she said. Can you join? Send me the link, I said. Minutes later, I was logged into a video conference call from my laptop, still sitting on that park bench. The faces on the screen were grim. Most of the board members, minus Brandon, who was conspicuously absent, likely told to wait elsewhere. Sarah Jenkins led the discussion. Aaron, she began formally, the board understands there's been a disruption following your conversation with Mr. Brooks this morning. Can you explain your position and what you require to restore normal operations? I laid it out calmly, clearly. No emotion, just facts. My 17 years of service, the critical nature of the systems, Brandon's dismissal, the contract clause, the current lockdown status, then my demands. First, I said, looking directly into the webcam, I require a formal public apology from Brandon Brooks, not just to me, but to my entire team, acknowledging his dismissal of our value and the recklessness of his actions. This apology needs to be documented in company-wide communications. Eyebrows raised on screen. This wasn't just about money. Second, I continued, my team, the dedicated professionals who keep this company running. Their positions must be guaranteed, their current compensation and benefits secured in writing for a minimum of 2 years. They deserve stability, regardless of leadership whims. More nods. This resonated with the board's need for operational continuity. Third, I stated, the severance package Brandon offered is null and void. We will negotiate a new separation agreement, one that reflects my 17 years of contribution, the intellectual property vested in the systems I built, and the terms outlined in the original contract regarding this specific contingency. This will be handled through legal counsel. And finally, I concluded, Brandon Brooks must be removed from any operational decision-making role involving the company's technical infrastructure. permanently. He has proven himself unfit and poses an active risk to the company's stability. The virtual room was silent for a long moment. Sarah Jenkins looked at the other board members, a silent conversation passing between them. "Aaron," she said finally, her voice firm, "your terms are significant, but the company is currently non-operational. We understand the gravity. Give us 1 hour to discuss this internally and consult with legal. We will also need to speak with Brandon." "Understood," I replied. "You have my number, but Sarah, the systems remain offline until we have a signed agreement on these points." I disconnected the call. The sun was higher now. The fury had cooled, replaced by a sense of resolute calm. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about accountability. Brandon wanted to play CEO? Fine. Time for him to face the consequences of his actions in the real world, not just coast on his last name. The ultimatum was delivered. The ball was in their court. The silence from the Brooks Tech building across the street felt heavy with anticipation. My anticipation. The hour passed slowly. I stayed on the bench watching people come and go in the park, detached from the corporate drama unfolding just yards away. My phone remained silent. Then, exactly 60 minutes later, Sarah Jenkins called back. "Aaron," she said, her voice carrying a weight of finality. "The board has agreed to your terms, all of them." Relief washed over me, cool and clean. Not triumph, just validation. "Legal is drafting the agreements now," she continued. "Regarding Brandon, the board concurs with your assessment. He will issue the apology as stipulated. His operational authority concerning technology is revoked effective immediately. The board will be overseeing that area directly for the time being." "And my team?" I asked, needing to hear it confirmed. "Their roles and compensation are secured, as you requested. We need them. We know that now more clearly than ever." There was an unspoken acknowledgement in her tone. "Good," I said quietly. "Send the documents to my personal email. Once I've reviewed them with my attorney and we have signatures, I will restore system access." "How quickly can that happen, Aaron? We're bleeding time here." "The moment the agreements are executed," I assured her. "Restoring access is simple. Preventing this kind of chaos again, that depends on the lessons learned today." Within another hour, the legal documents arrived. My lawyer, whom I'd already alerted, reviewed them swiftly. Everything was there, exactly as demanded. The public apology language was unequivocal. The team guarantees were ironclad. The severance terms were significantly more than fair, acknowledging my contributions and the contract leverage. And Brandon's removal from tech oversight was formalized. Signatures were exchanged electronically. Done. I opened my laptop again, logged back into the secure terminal. A few keystrokes, another command. Enter. The administrative lockdown was lifted. Access restored. Just like that. I pictured the lights blinking back on inside Brooks Tech, logins working, data flowing. The frantic energy likely shifting to relief, then maybe resentment towards Brandon. His apology would land in inboxes soon. Humiliating for him, yes, but necessary. My phone rang again almost immediately. Sarah Jenkins. "Systems are back online, Aaron," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank you." "Just fulfilling the final part of the agreement, Sarah," I replied. "My team knows how to handle things from here. They're the best." "We know," she said. "Aaron, Robert wants to speak with you." Robert Brooks, the founder, Brandon's father. I hadn't expected that. "Okay," I said, suddenly feeling a different kind of tension. "Put him through." There was a click, and then a voice I hadn't heard in a while, rougher now, tired. "Aaron?" "Robert," I said. It felt strange talking to him after all this. "Aaron, I owe you an apology," he began, his voice heavy. A profound one. What Brandon did, it was inexcusable. Arrogant, stupid. He doesn't understand the first thing about respect, about loyalty, about what you built. Hearing it from him, the man whose vision I'd helped realize for 17 years, it landed differently. It wasn't just vindication. It felt like a crack opening in the wall of bitterness I'd felt building up. "I take full responsibility, Aaron," he continued. "I put him in that position. I hoped he'd rise to the occasion, learn. I was wrong, blinded by, well, it doesn't matter. I was wrong, and you paid the price for my mistake." I listened, saying nothing, just absorbing the weight of his words. "The board told me about your terms," he said. "They were fair, more than fair. You protected the company even while holding it accountable. That's the kind of integrity I always valued in you." He paused, took a breath. Aaron, I know the severance is settled, but that's not enough. What you built here, it's invaluable. Brooks Tech needs stability. It needs leadership that understands its core. Leadership like yours. I waited, unsure where this was going. I want to make you a better offer, he said, his voice gaining a bit of its old energy. Forget the severance. I want to offer you co-ownership, significant equity, and I want your help choosing new leadership. Someone competent, someone with integrity. Maybe even you, Aaron, if you'd consider coming back, not just as head of systems, but as a partner, a leader. Help me fix this mess I've made. Co-ownership, a seat at the main table, the ultimate acknowledgement of my value offered by the founder himself. It was staggering. Everything I thought I'd lost, the recognition, the respect, the sense of belonging, being offered back and more. For a moment, I felt the pull, the desire to step back in, to fix it, to run it the right way, to take the seat Brandon had proven so unworthy of. It was bittersweet. Sweet because it was validation, hard-earned, and finally given freely. Bitter because it took near disaster, engineered by my own hand out of necessity, for that value to be truly seen by those at the very top. Bitter because the trust, once broken so carelessly, couldn't just be glued back together with an offer, no matter how generous. Robert's regret felt genuine. But the wound inflicted by Brandon, by the system that allowed his entitlement to override competence, was deep. Could I really go back? Did I want to? The question hung in the air, heavy and complex. A seat at the table was offered, but was it the right table for me anymore? Sitting there, listening to Robert Brooks' offer, co-ownership, leadership, the chance to shape the future of the company I dedicated nearly 2 decades to, it was a powerful moment. Part of me, the part that had bled code and caffeine for Brooks Tech, felt a surge of something. Vindication, yes, but also a sense of duty. A desire to right the ship. But as I considered it, looking back across the street at the building where I'd just been so casually discarded, something else settled within me. A quiet clarity. The table Robert was offering, even with him sitting at it again, felt tainted. Not by him, necessarily, but by the events of the past week. By the ease with which loyalty could be dismissed, with which legacy could be handed over to incompetence based purely on bloodline. Could I work alongside people who had stood by, even passively, while Brandon ascended? Could I trust that the lessons learned wouldn't fade once the crisis passed? Could I pour my energy back into a place where my value had to be proven through forced disruption rather than consistent excellence? The answer, I realized, was no. Robert, I began, my voice gentle but firm, I appreciate the offer, sincerely, more than you know, and I appreciate your apology. It means a great deal. He waited, sensing the but coming. But I can't accept, I said. My time at Brooks Tech is over. What happened? It wasn't just about Brandon. It showed me something about the structure, perhaps. About myself, too. I need to build something new now, something on my own terms. There was a long pause on his end. Then, a sigh. Not of frustration, but of understanding, maybe resignation. I was afraid you might say that, Aaron. Selfishly, I hoped otherwise. But I respect your decision. You've earned the right to build your own legacy, that's for sure. Thank you, Robert, I said. I do wish you and the company well. My old team, they're excellent. Trust them. We will, he replied. And Aaron, if you ever need anything, advice, resources, my door is always open, truly. Thank you, I said again, and we ended the call. I closed my laptop, stood up from the bench. The severance agreement was solid, more than enough to provide a cushion. But more importantly, I felt free, lighter. The weight of those 17 years wasn't a burden anymore, nor was it a forgotten history. It was experience. It was capital. It was the foundation, not for Brooks Tech's future, but for mine. I didn't need a crown they hadn't wanted to give me until forced. I didn't need a seat at their table to validate my worth. My worth wasn't tied to their recognition. It was tied to my skills, my integrity, my vision. In the following months, news trickled out. Brandon Brooks quietly faded from any meaningful role at the company, eventually leaving altogether, relegated to some obscure family office function. Brooks Tech stabilized, thanks largely to my former team stepping up, but it seemed to lose some of its momentum, its innovative edge. Robert eventually appointed a new external CEO, someone competent, but perhaps lacking the deep institutional knowledge that had been lost. And me, I didn't make a big announcement, no fanfare. I took some time off, decompressed, reconnected with myself outside of the demanding tech world. Then quietly, I started building. I founded Dawson Systems, a small consultancy at first, focused on systems architecture, security, and operational integrity, the things I knew best. My reputation, built over 17 years of quiet competence, preceded me. Clients came, good clients, ones who valued expertise, reliability, and partnership. Dawson Systems grew organically, built on the principles my parents taught me: hard work, responsibility, quiet excellence. We didn't chase hype, we delivered results. We built trust, not through flashy presentations, but through solid work and unwavering integrity. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about creation, building something that reflected my values, where loyalty wasn't just expected but reciprocated, and where competence was the only currency that mattered. I didn't need to be CEO of Brooks Tech to prove anything. My success wasn't measured by reclaiming a title someone tried to strip away, but by forging my own path, quietly, deliberately, successfully. Brandon wanted a kingdom handed to him. I built mine from the ground up, no crown needed, just skill and resolve. And honestly, that felt like the most profound kind of victory. A quiet rise, built not on entitlement, but on earned respect. Looking back now, the whole ordeal taught me something crucial. Your worth isn't decided by who recognizes you, or who gives you a title, or who sits you at their table. It's not dependent on their validation. Your true worth, it's carved by the work you do, the integrity you hold, the systems you build, both literally and figuratively, especially when no one's watching. It's proven in the value you create, consistently, quietly. And sometimes, the most powerful statement isn't a loud declaration, but the quiet confidence of walking away and building something better on your own terms. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or had your contributions dismissed, but you kept going anyway, kept building, kept holding on to your principles, I'd love to hear about it. Share your story or just your thoughts in the comments below. I promise I'm reading every single one. And trust me, you're not alone in these experiences. If this story resonated with you, if you found a piece of yourself in this journey of quiet strength and finding your own path, please hit that subscribe button and stay with us here at TK Revenge Story for more journeys of resilience and personal redemption. And finally, if you feel moved to support the channel and help us continue bringing these stories to light, you can use the super thanks button below this video. Sometimes, giving back, even in a small way like offering thanks, can be part of the healing process too, for all of us. Thank you so much for listening.